So just for my clarification, can you give the distinction between totalitarianism and authoritarianism? I just kind of assumed those were the same thing.
No, because authoritarianism is, it's anti-democratic in nature, it's anti-majoritarian in nature, but the power is still shared. Some people may have some share of the power or some say in it, like constitutional monarchies are still authoritarian, theocracies are still authoritarian. But if you look at absolutist France, for example, the monarch controlled every single aspect of society. And it's the same thing in Hitler's Germany, where the Führer controlled every single aspect of society, but it wasn't the same in Mussolini's Italy, where the power was handed down.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. Hey guys, welcome back to Discourse Debrief, episode 6. A couple of things that I want to talk about before we get into the episode. First off, we have some events coming up. March 25th, that's next week, we have our faculty panel. We're going to be talking about corporatization of the university. That's in the Sabino room at 7 p.m. Then, just for your information, the weekend of April 12th is the Regents Cup. It's a debate, right? Oxford-style debate. Some of us are going to be participating. Well, all of us actually are going to be participating in that. And then Tuesday, May 6th, we have our end-of-semester panel with 3 of us here, not you, and some other cool people from the Discourse series. So you should check those out. With that said, I'm Robert.
Blossom.
I'm Logan.
And I am Peyton.
And today is Logan's topic, so let's hear it.
Yes. So I just realized the March 25th event will have already happened by the time this is up.
Awesome.
So, but hopefully we
you
live
went there.
streamed it. That too.
Yeah.
Hopefully it's on the YouTube somewhere. So go check that out. Okay. So today we're going to talk about a very political thing.
No way.
That is always in the media. That's always been thrown around. We're going to talk about the F word.
Which one?
The French.
Even worse. Actually, French is even worse.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about specifically what is fascism.
Oh.
So, how do you guys want to start this? You want to start just giving how you personally understand the word, or
I want you to tell us.
Tell us the
Okay.
definition of fascism.
that's a hard thing to do. I guess I'll give 2 criteria that I kind of abide by. Dang.
Thank you. I'm on it.
I think for someone to be fascist, they have to be really, really nationalist and really, really authoritarian. Those are just kind of the 2 basic criteria that if you meet both of those, you're probably more fascist than not. But I also think, and this is something we can get into, the word fascist probably has a bit of a spectrum to it. So that might be an interesting conversation, but I'll hand it off to whoever wants to go next.
I will jump in because that's about the extent of my knowledge.
Okay.
Other than general vibes that, I don't know, kind of you recognize it when you see it, but I think the nationalist and authoritarian component are the big things for me, but I'm sure y'all have more nuance there.
I want to go last.
Of course he does.
I don't have any opinions on this.
You have no opinions on fascism. That's your official statement.
Well, no opinions on the definition of the word right now.
Okay.
You can have an opinion on a definition?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
As you 2 just gave opinions on a definition.
And then define the word.
Okay.
That's brutal. Okay. Blossom's still in debate mode. She sees Logan and she's like, "You're my enemy. It's search and destroy, hunter-killer drone." I think that you're wrong because I think it's dangerous to try to identify something as dangerous as fascism based on vibes alone or it when you see it. I think that can lead to extremities or excesses on either side, either everyone's a fascist or you never are able to identify fascism. But I agree with Logan that it does exist on a spectrum because we can talk about the theoretical political foundations of fascism like Georges Sorel and Mussolini, or we can talk about general rise of right-wing ideologies that are racialist in nature, like American fascism.
Sure.
But for me, I would say that fascism is based on those original points of fascism by the original fascists. So it's race, nation, so it's blood and land basically, and those are the 2 basic tenets of fascism.
Sure. So I guess maybe we can give some examples of fascistic Sure.
Sure.
Tendencies.
Fascistic.
Yeah, tendencies that like are displayed by either like individuals or governments. I promise we'll get to Trump eventually.
Is that why you put Elon up there?
No, it's for the chainsaw. Look at how cool he looks.
It's a pretty cool chainsaw, and Malay is just like, yeah.
Is that his name?
I don't know how you say it, but we'll get into that.
Melon is up there.
Sure, we'll get into that at some point. So for now, just like to the best of your knowledge, like what are some examples of like fascistic tendencies? So like I guess for me, it's just like being really, really. I don't want to say protectionist because like that's not inherently bad, but like really, really isolated. So like. Was it like pre-World War I, the U.S. just was like completely cut off from the rest of the world?
Yes.
So like that would be like something like it's a little iffy, but like obviously like on its own that's not inherently fascist if you combine it with
Do
authoritarian.
you think it's a confluence of factors?
Sure. Yeah.
I would agree.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. Anything you can think of examples?
I mean, I'm thinking Hitler. I'm thinking Mussolini, Stalin.
I don't think Hitler was a fascist.
Well, I'll get into why. Like
take.
I said, I have a very rough understanding. But the reason I say Hitler is because rallies his people, specifically Aryans, under a very nationalistic, culturalistic, isolationist kind of, I don't know, I'm going to use the word vibe, even though I know you don't like it, rhetoric. And it's manifested such that there is one guy who is the primary spearhead and everybody will fall under, but I recognize I have a very loose understanding of
I
fascism.
would disagree immediately because fascism doesn't necessitate one guy. I mean, Italy was ruled by a grand council of fascism at a certain point. It's actually Hitler's ideology specifically that necessitates one person. That's the Führer principle. Hi. So yeah. There's a differentiation between fascism and National Socialism. There's like the economic component, and like National Socialism is more totalitarian, whereas fascism is more authoritarian. It's kind of like if you think about like monarchies, for example, you have authoritarian monarchies, and then you had like the absolutist monarchies. It's kind of the same thing for me, at least, whereas like fascists don't have to be totalitarian. They're authoritarian, but it's an authoritarianism that's based in racist ideology.
So just for my clarification, can you give the distinction between totalitarianism and authoritarianism? I just kind of assumed those were the same thing.
No, because authoritarianism is, it's anti-democratic in nature. It's anti-majoritarian in nature, but the power is still shared. Like some people may have some share of the power or some say in it. Like constitutional monarchies are still authoritarian, theocracies are still authoritarian. But if you look at like absolutist France, for example, like the monarch controlled every single aspect of society. And it's the same thing in like Hitler's Germany, where the Führer controlled every single aspect of society, but it wasn't the same in Mussolini's Italy, where the power was like handed down.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Cool. Blossom, do you have anything to add? Okay.
Blossom hates your topic. Blossom hates your topic immensely.
I understand why. I'm sorry. Okay, let's kind of shift from historical to modern day. What do you think the modern day fascism looks like? Both in like a media sense and a practical sense.
Well, I've obviously been demonstrated as having a flawed and weak understanding of fascism.
I don't want to just be expounding my wisdom the whole time.
This is just a lecture.
Yeah. Can we put my PowerPoint up there while we're at it?
I don't know. I mean, I guess part of why, and again, I know I don't like it, it's like vibes in my head, is because I feel like the word has been diluted today. Like, Trump's a fascist is like a very popular thing online. May or may not be true. We can get into that. I'm sure we will.
Yep.
But so I have that and like probably incorrectly attributed titles to like World War II leaders. So in my head, like I conflated totalitarian and authoritarian. I just thought that was the same thing. But if that's not, then all I have to go off of is there's, in my understanding, more of a totalitarian vibe, at least in modern day politics. At least that's how it's made to be. And they're supported unilaterally by a group that is of probably a similar ethnic and cultural backing. But maybe that's not specific enough to classify it as fascism.
I think something unique about American fascism is that the like racial classification for being part of that group has kind of shifted over time. Like if you look at like the furthest right America First crowds, they do have people who aren't like, just pure European people, which I think is something unique kind of to specifically American fascism. I mean, it's not like Hitler and Mussolini didn't have like allies who weren't European, but like specifically the power base of the American fascist group is in large part built of people who aren't white, which is interesting to say the least. I do think that you see a surge in like rhetoric, like populist rhetoric, right-wing populist rhetoric against immigrants, and they don't ever frame it, at least in the mainstream, as against being against a certain race or against whatever. But they do say against this group of people, this group of people, this group of people, and they all just happen to be different races or different sexualities.
Sure.
So, yeah.
What a coincidence.
It's covert. The rise of fascism in America is like very subtle, in my opinion, because it's excluding a bunch of people and it's expounding expanding the power base. What's up, Blossom? What's so funny?
It's baiting.
She just looked at me, and I looked at her, did a little smile, and apparently it's funny, like me. But speaking of funny, history and modern-day fascism, you say today is more subtle, at least in America. Back then, maybe not so much. What is the common denominator, if there is one?
I think they have that in common, that they use the same ways of building power. It's just that we're not, readily apparent, we're not, at least in the mainstream, you'll have politicians saying this is authoritarianism, this is whatever, but you won't say them saying oh, this is exactly like how Mussolini started to consolidate power in Italy, even though that may or may not be true. Sure. You just will never see that.
Sure.
So would one fair common denominator be populism?
Yeah.
That'd be one component.
Definitely.
Some kind of isolationist mentality. I guess today it would be more cultural than explicitly race.
Isolationist and
also,
aggressive foreign policy.
Yeah, expansionist kind of thing. And to your point of no one, at least higher up, with any credibility, is just going to come out and say okay, this is fascist. I think part of that is the responsibility of the media and how they've essentially just watered down what it even means to be a fascist.
Yeah.
So there's definitely
generally just with empires in general, even removing fascism, expansionism is how they sustain themselves.
Sure.
Every single time we've seen the United States go into a kind of a decline, you then see it followed up by a bunch of expansion, and now we're starting to see that pick back up again.
I feel like we should have Blossom say something, and if you're comfortable doing so, just that it's not just.
How can we make this topic more interesting
three guys
for you?
yapping?
It's not that it's not interesting. It's just that I don't disagree.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm going to stop talking entirely.
Okay. maybe we can sow some disagreement then. Do you think the rhetoric coming from, I won't say the Democratic Party, but the Democratic base saying Trump is a fascist, do you think that's justified?
Let Blossom answer first.
No,
You don't think so?
not yet.
Okay.
I think that in general, this is not even going off fascism. I think our generation is too comfortable throwing words around, big words. They throw out words like traumatic and fascist and socialism and communism, and they don't know what it means. Marxism, everyone, they throw things out, and they don't really grasp the understanding of it. Like Peyton was saying, you just go off vibes.
Sure.
Someone says something and you just jump on the trend. I'm yet to see anyone really analyze the structure of power and what's going on and be oh yeah, this is the trend for fascism. And if we do sit down and we make this the topic about analyzing him, and then we come to that conclusion, then I can say yes or I can say no. But because I haven't done that, I won't just throw that word around.
It's very reasonable.
You have successfully sown some disagreement.
Ooh.
Well, I'm going to build off of that
Go.
in
Nice.
agreement.
Yeah, you go.
Justified. Ooh, fun word.
Justification.
But, in my personal opinion, right now, I don't think it's effective. for the same reason that you mentioned. People are throwing words around without knowing what they mean, such that they lose that meaning, gets diluted. For me personally, and I know that this probably wouldn't work for everybody, like just saying things as they are, and maybe drawing correlations between specific events and patterns, like describing them without attaching a title like fascist would be more effective. But I also recognize that we live in a very different kind of society where, again, we are just throwing words around. It's easy to rally emotion that way. But I worry that when we get emotions riled without an understanding of that nuance, we don't know the best ways to execute it. But maybe I'm a little pessimistic about that.
I like, with the like your answer to the question overall, I slightly disagree with, but you bring up like a really interesting point of like it is probably better to just like describe what's going on instead of labeling it as fascist, because I think for your average American, if you're just hearing fascism 3 times a day, you're just gonna be like, whatever, everything's fascism at this point. But like if you're hearing, you know, what's actually going on and you know why it's bad, I think that is probably way more effective. So I agree on that point.
I would say that I kind of disagree there. I'm not saying that it's the word itself that's the problem. I'm saying it's like
The word without thought behind it.
yes, the word without thought and the word without explanation, that's the problem.
Well, I'd say that's like probably the same thing that I'm talking about.
Okay.
I feel like the reason I disagree is because, one, the reason that I feel like we hear the word fascism used a lot isn't because it's being thrown around uselessly. It's because like that's the trend where things are going. We may not be there yet, and I would say that we're not quite there yet, and like we've been on this trend for a while now.
We're on the spectrum.
We're on the spectrum. All of us here are on the spectrum. But yeah, no, I just think that we've been on that trend for a while, and it's not a negative thing for people to have started saying that, because the reason that we think that it's a negative thing that they started saying that is because we kind of got psyoped into thinking that, you know, in 2016, people calling Trump a fascist were just, you know, they're just throwing this word around. They don't really know what fascism means. And then they just keep using it for the next 8 years. But like the reason they did that is because they recognized the trend earlier than most people did, and the rhetoric earlier than most people did. And I also feel like we hear words just thrown around a lot because we're on a university campus. And like while we are very political students, we're also very young students. And when you're young, you kind of don't have things as, you know, in depth as you will when you get older.
So,
I think,
sorry, go ahead.
I agree. I have no problem with people using the word fascist if they understand what it means. My entire problem is I don't like the trend. I feel like Gen Z, we're very like hop on trends kind of people.
Mm-hmm.
And so like there is the sense that people who have studied or like analyzing the trends, like you say, recognize these patterns and say it. And then there'll be one random Gen Z who's just like, this is it. Or like just...
That's like the base of all political movements, though. It's not really like a Gen Z exclusive thing where you have like a certain number of people, they do a bunch of research, they become really in-depth. You have a certain number of people, and they're the ones that are like the speakers for the movement. And then you have like large number of people who are like, this gets me pumped up. I recognize some of this. I don't fully understand it, but like, I'm ready. I'm with you.
Yeah.
So like, okay, I just want to ask, like, these political communicators or whatever that like you mentioned in 2016, do you think they could like do a better job at communicating that? Or I guess let me ask you this: is it the communicator's fault or the people's fault for not believing?
Neither.
It's neither.
It's the culture's fault. We have bread and circuses culture in the United States, where it's like the news channels you watch aren't news; they're entertainment. So when you had like some genuine people trying to like tell you this is what's happening, and then you know the like media will just be like, oh, blah 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 blah, and then your head gets bombarded basically with nonsense.
So if there is an issue, and I agree that there probably is, of like the people just don't fully understand, you know, the problems that are going on, what is the solution, if any?
Education.
Changing the power structure.
And you do that through educating the people on why it's bad, and they want to change it, and then you have more people who want to change it, and then they change it.
Yep, I never said they were mutually exclusive.
I know.
I do think there's like misinformation being thrown around as much as there's people who are like championing the movement, which is good. We welcome movements. I think every society needs that. But there's also misinformation to a large extent on both sides, whether you're on the left or the right or whatever else is in America. I feel like there's a lot of misinformation. And so I think the best way to combat that misinformation is maybe more education. I think people in general are just not as literate as they could be.
I have a question.
Okay, go for it.
Sorry to cut you off.
No,
there.
you're fine. You're fine.
I have a question for you and for everyone. I think it'll be interesting because we all agree, like, this is the United States. We have free speech to an extent. We talked about that before. We have freedom of ideas to an extent, and we all agreed that, like, certain ideas should be shared as long as they're not just like shouting slurs at people. Is basically where we drew that line.
Sure.
Do you think that fascism as an idea should exist in a society? Like, if people choose to, adopt that ideology, do you think that should be okay? Is that a good thing or a bad thing or an okay thing?
I think the very definition of freedom of choice and free will necessitates that we're okay with people having an idea that's different from ours. Whether that idea is right or wrong is a different thing. Now, you can have very interesting ideas, and I can stop you from having those ideas because it's your mind. I'm not going to reach in and lock it up. But
I will.
if you're asking for the morality of the idea,
Yeah.
that's a different thing.
Yeah. What about?
I think on principle, yeah, you probably should have like the freedom to have those ideas. But if that like ever gets into significant power, I'm running north.
So the reason I asked that is because we kind of, you don't get an answer. The reason that I asked that is because we agreed that it's kind of, I think that we agreed that we can see a trend where more and more people are exposing themselves to these ideas, or at least we hear about it a lot more.
Sure.
Which must mean that there's something seductive about it. And then we also agreed that people aren't educated enough to know what it really is, and that cuts both ways. So, like, people who don't know what fascism is, they may be just as likely to call someone a fascist as they are to, be adopted into fascism.
Sure. I want to ask a question kind of attached to that. Do you think there is a meaningful distinction between like just politicians shouting fascism for like political rhetoric and optics, and actually like educated people that know what fascism is and saying that?
I think ideally the educated people should be the politicians, but I think that
What a thought.
the politicians have a lot of influence in our country because we kind of have cults of politicians. I mean, we know the names of senators that aren't from our state.
Right.
And the senators will campaign around the country even if they're not running for president. Cough, cough. So, yeah, I feel like there is a meaningful distinction because we're not platforming the people with the most knowledge. If that makes sense.
And like, is there like value to those politicians shouting fascism, even if it's maybe not always warranted?
Yes.
Because like you agree that or we all agree that there is a trend, but like, I almost get the sense that these politicians are like shouting it for maybe the wrong reasons.
I think that it's not mutually exclusive to want to educate the people more, but also understand that like the people are going to be exposed to a political idea one way or the other, and that they may agree with it for bad reasons. So you want as many people to agree that fascism is bad, even if it's for misunderstanding it.
I'm going to contest that. I have a slightly different framing of if politicians are doing it for optical reasons. I don't think it's a form of education per se. I think it's an emotional reaction. Like if we use the word alone, and we've already established that, especially in modern day America, it's kind of loose, it's kind of subtle. I imagine that would just, the primary thing would be an emotional response. Sure, there might be a little bit of like context or information given with that, but if we keep doing that, building this emotional response, we're gonna have all this energy, but if we don't have a place to put it, then...
Well, maybe I'm misunderstanding you, because earlier you said that the way that we would change things is by educating more people and by putting more into education. Whereas I'm saying that we should absolutely do that, but we should also recognize that it's not necessarily bad to have, it's not good, but where we're at right now, we should still continue this thing of like calling out fascism, even if people don't fully understand it.
I think it's a question of like, do the ends justify the means? So like,
yes.
If we manipulate the people into thinking fascism is a bad idea rather than educating on that, is like, the result is the same, but I would imagine you'd say for the wrong reason.
I'd reframe it to where we're manipulating the people to feel that fascism is a bad thing if we're just doing it rhetorically.
I don't think
there's a meaningful distinction.
We're manipulating them though, necessarily.
Yeah, I wouldn't use that word. I was just using it.
I have a question.
Go for it.
Do you think the people in America who are arguably fascist know that they are fascist?
Yes. Well, not all of them, but a lot of them, yes.
Like, do you think the young people actually? Because there are people, I agree, like
the
you
base?
said, that who have those ideas and spread it, and then it becomes populist. So the people who are like
It depends.
claiming those populist ideas, do you think they're recognized as fascist, or do you think they just think, well, this is just
Go ahead.
this supremacy or whatever?
I have 3 answers. The base of supporters, I'm going to say most of them probably not, because I don't think they just can possibly understand. The sort of higher ups in office, like the brains, definitely. Trump, I can't possibly know. I don't know.
I don't think he knows what's going on.
I don't know if he knows exactly what he's doing, or he's just like winging
Bro's
it
in his
every
own
day.
dimension.
I have no idea.
I would say that young college students, I also think I don't know, I want to get away from the idea that we just know what fascism is more than anyone.
Sure.
Because I don't know, I'm not comfortable putting myself in that elite position.
Right.
But I would say that young people, like college students, are more comfortable calling themselves fascists than older right-wing people, in my opinion. From what I've seen interacting with college students, they're more comfortable saying things like, "Oh, I'm super far right," or
Sure.
Whereas before you would hear stuff like, "I'm conservative," I believe in traditional values, and now it's just yeah, I'm super far right, which is not. That's saying something else.
Do you think it's the same kind of dichotomy, and I'll add ratio for further left-leaning college students who are oh yeah, I'm a communist?
Yeah, I do. I do think it's the same thing.
Do you
Do you think it's the same ratio?
Yes, I would say.
Okay.
Do you think educational knowledge, in quotes, provides people this sort of, also in quotes, immunity? This sort of bravado to really think that they have the rights to call themselves either communist or fascist? Do you think that it's the education actually that they're getting that makes them super comfortable doing this?
I think just it's part of the college experience in general, where you're kind of at that, I don't want to say maturity level, but you're at that age where you're
I'll say maturity level.
more extremist than you are centrist, which is I'd say is fairly common for most people.
In college, yeah.
Yeah, but afterwards, you're in your 30s, you might, I don't know, regress to the mean, so to speak, a little bit more.
I would say that you're exposed to a lot of ideas when you go into college. There's a whole bunch of life changes happening, personal changes, physical changes, and then maybe you moved, maybe you're no longer living with your family, and so the politics you grew up with is completely different.
Yes.
Then you're also 18 years old, so you think that you know everything in the world. Now I'm 23 and I know everything in the world.
There's also national politics that can push us further left, further right.
And at the end of the day, you'll see people that will call themselves a fascist and they'll be uneducated, and you'll see people that will call themselves a communist and they'll be uneducated. Mm-hmm. But then you can also see people that call themselves a fascist and they are educated. That exists. You'll see people that call themselves communists and those exist. Mm-hmm. And then even when you get older, I wouldn't say that you see more people regress. I mean, maybe you do see a majority of people become less extreme, but I feel that comes from at least at our university, lots of us are politically active. Sure. And then after 8 years of not seeing any systematic changes, that can really damage someone. So maybe they don't become less, radical. Maybe they don't become less of an extremist, but they become more disillusioned with the idea of change being possible. And so they vote for the status quo.
Less motivated.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can definitely see that as being true. You have something to say or add to that?
I did, and I
look
lost my
like you're
train
deep
of
in
thought.
thought.
Yeah.
I was so deep that I lost it.
Pause.
Well, I do have a question now.
Go for it.
So let's take that hypothetical educated communist, educated fascist.
Put them in a room.
Put them in a room.
Make them fight to the death. Sorry, go on.
Put them into a room and make them battle their idea. But actually, if we have educated, that is the same. They have ideologies, so we can't we know that they have an educational background. How do we discern which we should adhere to at that point?
Well, it's
I feel literacy and education are two different things, but
Let's say they have both. Both
Okay.
This hypothetical communist, hypothetical fascist has both of those, and the viewer be it like us or whoever.
I mean,
has that as well.
I have two things. Like one of those, if we're just taking their ideologies, right?
Yeah.
At their core, one of those ideologies is inclusionary and one of them is exclusionary. And why would we as a people want to adopt an exclusionary ideology? And then that's where you have to get into how did they reach that point? And you get into their education, and then that's when you find that there's something wrong in that judgment decision that they made.
Yeah, I was going to attach a question to that. If we have an educated fascist, can we rightly say that the education system has failed them because they reached that position?
I wouldn't say that.
I wouldn't go that far. I mean, for anybody who's going to have a more extreme is a harsh word, but extreme ideology, there's always going to be personal experiences that grow and kind of influence how you interpret your education. Your education is going to interpret your future experiences. It's all
and
kind
every
of
person
cyclical.
is different. And it's like, it's kind of hard to know how someone ended up. Like for some people you can just tell, but for other people it's just really hard to tell how they got to where they are ideologically.
Sure,
Can
but
I-
like,
Yes.
yeah, go for it, and then I'll.
I was going to ask a question, but I think this might throw everything off.
Do it.
Yeah,
Silent
I'm good
slogan.
with that.
Okay, so if we have fascism as the far right and communism as the far left, hypothetically, is capitalism the center?
No.
No.
Capitalism is an inherently right-wing ideology. And fascism goes hand in hand with capitalism, in my opinion.
I feel like tell me if I'm wrong, but it's not the easiest comparison because fascism is primarily political and
No. It's
like
communism
apples and
is
No,
more
fascism
so,
is political economic organization.
Okay, then I just didn't understand.
Yeah.
So would you put socialism, capitalism anywhere on that ring, or would you say separate all of them?
For socialism, it's harder because,
Well-
like, if we just take what socialism is, socialism would be like purely economic, and like that's why there's right-wing socialists.
And also just like using one line as one spectrum to define like all these different things is kind of hard.
Yeah, left-right is very false in my opinion.
But I just don't know enough about economics to make an education.
I don't know. I would say that capitalism is like a right-wing ideology, mostly just because that's how it's historically been adopted, and that's like basically the framework I would work off of. I wouldn't say that socialism is inherently left-wing or right-wing. I don't know. We've seen communist regimes that are like super, like not left-wing as well. I would say that like maybe I'll make a distinction between Marxism and socialism. I'll say Marxism
Okay.
I can't define as being left-wing or right-wing, but socialism I would say is left-wing, if that makes sense.
Do you think capitalism being right-wing, do you think that's more out of like a correlation of right-wing nations, or do you genuinely think like the foundations of capitalism are right-wing?
I think that the foundations of capitalism lend themselves to right-wing ideologies.
Okay.
Would you say that there's something to be said about, like, let's say there's a correlation between, as you said earlier, like more right-leaning things will be exclusionary, left-leaning inclusionary. Capitalism to me is always going to be, to a certain degree, depending on how it's structured, exclusionary. And maybe that would be why we find ourselves feeling a little more right-leaning.
Capitalism is hierarchical in nature, in my opinion. There is that core ideology where it's like the best in society are going to shine through and become the richest. And there's something that like inherently at that core that makes it right-wing if we're going to use that. So yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Interesting. Which again goes back to the like using left-right to define all
Yeah.
these things is kind of,
Yeah.
but okay, interesting.
Crash course in Marxism complete.
Going back more to the fascism aspect, is there anything else that you guys specifically want to discuss before I move on?
Shout out Elon Musk.
CPAC.
CPAC. Shout out CPAC.
Um,
Where they literally did a Hitler salute.
What about for those of us who are hesitant, to say the least, about fascism moving forward, especially American fascism?
What do you mean
It's kind
hesitant about it?
of- we don't like it. We're worried about it.
I hope that's all of us.
I was gonna say.
Yeah, I know.
I hope all four blossom.
I don't want to immediately scare off
This
any
is your
potential
country.
fasci viewers, okay? But
No, we should absolutely be scaring them off. I'm
we got to
sorry.
plan this.
Dumb liberal.
I can fix them. I can fix. But nonetheless, what can and should we be doing as individual people, the audience? What can they do as individuals?
Discourse.
Vote.
Sorry.
Well, we might not have elections after 4 years.
It's true.
so.
Steve Bannon says Trump 2028.
Obama 2020.
God.
Yes. We need Biden back. Actually, he can do
Yes.
it. He could do it.
We need to dig up Jimmy Carter.
Yeah.
Oh my. real. Need some heart back in the office.
But actually, though, as individual people,
Discourse.
could you elaborate? I know what you mean, but could you elaborate?
Discourse with people. Don't let it turn off, remember?
I can't. Ooh, I have to do it on this.
Why are you edging it?
That's crazy.
Okay. Okay. Crisis averted. What the?
Wow. They
Almost
paused after
swore,
the first
but I
word
didn't.
so they
Yep.
could coordinate finishing it together.
No, I
and
was
then
gonna
they
say
were
it that
surprised.
way.
We're both just on the same wavelength.
The same spectrum.
Goddamn right.
One might say.
You're about 14. It's fine.
Yeah, true. Spiritually, Peyton is 14 years old. We discovered this. Okay, bro.
Am I? What am I like?
That's
physically
worse than the
14?
Hitler
This is what
salute.
I'm going to do to any fascists I meet. I'm simply going to dab on them, and they're going to be left speechless, such that they will
And then
never
they're
share
gonna
their
meet you with
ideology
the-
again.
Okay. Elaborate on discourse.
Like sharing your ideas with people, discussing with people, even if they have different opinions. I mean, the reason that I didn't elaborate is because I feel like I say this every episode because Peyton asks the same question every episode, like, where do we go from here? My answer is always going to be like spreading your ideas as
I'm
far as you
Pavlov
can.
training the audience.
I mean,
You're not like feeding them or anything. Yeah.
I think it's funny because what if discuss takes you in the other route, which is fine. Like we should absolutely. I think discuss is the right way to go, but I also find it funny that every ideology operates on the like core principle of discuss. So like fascists, of course, are gonna like
Well,
spread the idea in kind of
that
like,
can lead to an interesting question, and this might be like a whole other topic for later. Like,
Yeah.
are there some ideas that like just should be suppressed? Like especially like fascism.
Didn't we talk about this a little bit
next week?
Oh.
I might steal that.
I would approve.
all right, then we just leave a pin on that.
Yeah, we can bottle that up for later.
I'm sorry.
What?
What?
Let me
Whoa.
get my answer.
Whoa. Damn, bro. How long has it even been?
Like
40 minutes.
40
Oh,
minutes.
shit.
Shoot.
Did you just fucking curse?
God fucking damn it.
Jesus.
You do this every fucking time.
That's the real.
Cut that out.
We're talking about.
Shit.
Oh no, we have Ted's permission. Thank you.
If the other podcast can swear, shout out.
No need to argue.
No need to argue. I was getting there. Fuck you.
I mean, we try to put the suppressor on a little bit.
All right. Let's tone it
Sorry.
down.
My fault.
A lady's in the room.
That's crazy.
What? Oh, you mean you?
Some would say that's racist.
Some would be wrong. I changed my answer. We are throwing terms around a little bit too much.
But no. What we can do to, I'll just like be straight up curb fascism. Just continue our education.
The aliens.
They're coming for us.
Pause.
We've learned too much.
Resume.
Yep.
Okay, perfect.
Just continue our education. Like, I know you mentioned educated fascists being a thing.
You don't believe it?
I would have to see it to be true, and then I would question like.
Sounds like you're the ignorant one.
I very well could be. I very well could be, and then I would legitimately question like, okay, what happened in your education that led you to this?
So
The real
you
question
think-
would be what happened in
personal
your personal life, your experience.
Probably
You think so? You think discourse and boom? Is there anything else?
discourse and education.
Okay,
That's
I would say discourse, education, and a secret third thing I can't say out loud. Blossom.
Second Amendment.
I don't know, guys. Everyone should just pray.
Bless your heart.
Bless your heart.
Shout out Abby.
She didn't coin the phrase "bless your heart."
It's still funny.
She's not even to watch the episode. Are you, Abby? Trying to take my spot.
What were you saying? Sorry.
Anyways,
Yeah, I just think at this point, everyone needs religion.
I would disagree.
Or to be quirky and base like me. Okay. I don't even know how to describe how to do that.
No,
But-
just no. No.
Okay, worth a shot.
Just- yeah.
It works for me,
It's
guys.
not-
Just
it's
give
not
up on
working.
free will.
That was rough.
Let's just remember that I'm the one who is called the stupid liberal. Okay, so
I don't want to be a liberal, so liberalism isn't left wing.
Oh,
That's a hot take.
I think I know what your topic's
That's a
going to
true
be
take.
in 3 weeks, maybe.
All right. Well, I think we've hit our wits' end, so that's all
Yes.
for me. Whoever
This
wants-
is Robert signing off.
Let's get right.
Hello, Drama Alert Nation. Let's get right into the news.
Okay.
But real.
On that
who
note,
wants to
I'm
set
doing
us
the
up?
outro.
You're doing the outro.
I
Okay.
love outroing. It is my jam. It is my move. It is the play.
Okay, guys, thank you for watching our episode of Discourse Debrief. We'll see you next time.
I've been Logan.
I've been Peyton.
Robert,
Blossom.
Bye, y'all.
We'll see you next time.
peace out.